This is our second in-person meetup here at Prezi. We are very much excited, and I also basically like to see in future talking about the Prezi journey in the quality assistance space as well, how we started, where we are at now, and what our future plans are. Without taking any more time, I also basically like to hand over to Boris from the Talent Realize to say some words. They are our sponsor for this evening.
Hi there, I'm Barry from Talent Realized. So I'll keep it short and sweet because I know you're not really here to see me, but give you a little bit of background on who we are. We're a recruitment company that's been around for over 15 years. Around 6 years ago now, I came on board to set up the technology team, and that is now the main function of our business. So technology is such a great place to be in Sydney. So many great companies were started and founded here and went on to become huge globally. Companies like Canva, Atlassian, Safety Culture, all companies that we've also done business with over the years. And obviously Prezi falls into that bracket as well. Started here in Sydney and doing great things globally. So you see all there, we cover off most things in technology, a lot of work in development, DevOps, infrastructure, and QA and testing is a big area for us as well, which is why we're keen to sponsor this event. So we do have a number of roles. So have a chat to us. We don't bite, unlike many myths about recruiters. We're very friendly. So even if you want to say hello, connect with us now, or even for the future, come say hi. And I'll just hand you over to the talent in the room now. So it's Steve from Sydney, Paul from Sydney Testers.
Thank you.
First of all, I just want to wish you all, thank you so much for coming. It's really great that we're having engaged meetups where people are coming and people are really interested in the content and people are mingling and socializing. It's really the lifeblood of Sydney Testers and this lifeblood of people being really committed in testing as a community here in Sydney. So this is a talk by Anand Bagmar on automating real user scenarios across multiple apps and multiple devices. If you'd like to tweet about the event, our meetup, our Twitter handle is @SydneyTesters, or you can hashtag SYDAB. So tonight we're running about 10 minutes late at the moment. I'm sorry about that. So currently these are preambles by the host and the food sponsor and Sydney Testers. And then I'm just going to do a short presentation about Sydney Testers and about Anand, and then we'll move straight on to Anand's talk. And then there'll be a Q&A and then networking and socializing until they decide to wrap up. So who are Sydney Testers? We're a group of volunteers committed to increasing and improving testing in Sydney and focus on making it interesting and making for a good testing community. We organise monthly talks and socials and other events for this community. And we've had a wide range of international speakers. Some of the great luminaries are above. James Bark, Sam Connolly, who's here tonight, Baz Dijkstra, and Stephanie also is here tonight. Also, great people who have all contributed great talks to our events. If you'd like to get involved, we're looking for people to help us organise events and to join our exec committee. Please send me an email at paulwaltersau@gmail.com or have a chat with me. Okay, about tonight's speaker, Anand Bagmar. He's a software quality evangelist at Applitools with 20 plus years of experience in software testing, passionate about shipping quality products, specializing in product quality strategy and execution, also building testing tools, infrastructure and frameworks. He's contributed to the Selenium project, writes testing related blogs and builds open source frameworks and tools, the web analytics automation testing frameworks, TASS, Test Trend Analyzer, and TestWiz, which we'll be discussing tonight. His website and blog can be found at essenceoftesting.com. And thanks to Prezi for hosting the event tonight. Drink sponsor Talent Realized, the food and drink sponsor, and Applitools, who has greatly helped us. And this is the second speaker that they've put forward to speak at Sydney Testers over the last three or since June. And so we appreciate all of their efforts. Thanks so much. And now, please, Anand Bagmar. Round of applause. To share yours now. Have you been given? You've got a mic. Okay. Just give us a few minutes.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone see me? I'm still getting used to getting out of that customary question, right? When you start any call since the past 2 years, can you hear me? Can you see me? It sounds a little funny now, but that's the unfortunate reality we've been in. So, well, first of all, thank you everyone for coming here. Thank you all for all the sponsors and all the people involved in making this event happen. Really appreciate the effort put in. And it's an honor to be here speaking to every one of you. Already Paul has spoken a lot about me. I'm not going to repeat that. Just I would love to connect with you, continue the conversations even after the session today on Twitter, LinkedIn, and any other forum. I'm unfortunately, well, I should not say unfortunately, I love where I am. I'm based out of India, but I have been traveling. This month has been crazy travel, but I've loved every bit of it, meeting everyone. So would love to continue this conversation virtually as well in the online fashion as well. And of course, whenever we get a chance to meet up. So today, what I want to share with you is my experiences. And I've been speaking in a lot of conferences and events. The thing that motivates me to do that is to share my experiences based on what I've gone through, what has worked well, what has not gone well, and try to make a learning out of all of that. And use that as an opportunity to travel, meet up with people and share those experiences, learn from others as well. So today's talk is also the same thing. I came across a situation where it was a very different type of application. It needed a different type of thought process, how to automate some interesting end-to-end scenarios for that application. And it has been a journey. It's been more than 2 years where I started doing that. And something very interesting has come out of it. So that's the aspect that I want to share with you. Okay. So let's go through this journey and see if it can be applicable to you as well. I know we've all had great pizza and maybe drinks, but I'm going to ask you some questions. Okay. I need some participation over here. Why do we automate functional tests? We are lazy, yeah, and I'm a lazy person as well. That's what motivates me to do something in a creative way. So yes, but we are lazy. That's one good aspect out of it. But why do we automate? Cost effective, efficient. What are we trying to do with these tests? Regression. What does that mean? Not to repeat, but not to repeat what? Basically, we are trying to simulate what the user is doing with their application, right? They could be doing the same or the most important use cases. They could also be doing some weird things with their application, which you might have not thought about initially. But as soon as you identify what they are doing or what they can do with their application, you want to try and replicate that in form of your automated tests. So that if something fails, you get the coverage from your automated tests, right? You don't want to repeat it manually every time. So we want to simulate the user actions, user behavior with our application and ensure everything is working fine on every change that is happening in your application. The important thing, and this is nothing related to the talk, but this is a very important aspect from automation perspective that I want to share. It's important to remember that users, when they are interacting with our application, using our applications, they do not zip across our application. there is interaction that happens with your application. They will spend some time reading the information. In some cases, it is 5 seconds, 10 seconds. In some cases, it might be a lot of content or processing they need to do, but they're going to wait and interact with your application. It's not like you click on something and immediately you're going to click on something else or enter data, right? There's some processing happening. So our automation also sort of needs to replicate this behavior as well. In many cases, we want our automation to run so fast, it might not be realistic to how the user is using our application. And that is important to think about. Also, it does not mean if the user is going to spend 3 minutes reading a particular content, we are going to wait in our automation for that. But wait a reasonable time. It doesn't have to be within 1 second you need to proceed. That is probably not the realistic expectation on your application as well. So it's important to understand that behavior, what the users are going to be doing, what is your design of the application, the use case of your functionality, and accordingly, you need to try and replicate that as part of your automated tests. So yes, automation needs to be fast, but it also needs to be practical. Okay. Now, once we got this basics in place, what do we do next? We understand our application. What is the expected functionality? Is it a web-based? Is it mobile web? Is it native applications, desktop applications? We understand that, and based on that, we would understand and map out different user scenarios that are applicable for your application. Based on those user scenarios, you would do a cost value analysis, you will do prioritization and say what is important to be automated. Remember, we are talking about the top of the automation pyramid, just the UI functional test, not about the lower layers. Okay. You would need to put in that thought process to see what can be automated at lower layers of the pyramid, do it in a separate way. We are focusing about the top of the pyramid. So once you understand your user scenarios, you would prioritize that. And then this is actually a solved problem. Once you have this prioritized, it's a solved problem. How do you automate this? There are many different tools in the market over there, open source, commercial, and this is just a very small list of tools that is there. And what I'm going to discuss today is yet another way how you can automate as well. So I'm going to make it even more confusing for you if you are looking for a different tool to automate these scenarios. This tool or framework, what I call is TestWiz. It is available on GitHub. It's an open source framework. And TestWiz solves this problem in a similar fashion to many other tools that are already there, right? So for example, it uses Cucumber JVM based, Gherkin based language to specify your test intent. Simple, similar BDD tool sets that you would have in many other cases, right? And what this type of approach will do for you is it will let you specify, you can design your steps in whichever way you really want. You've got the full flexibility. The way I choose to do it, if I'm going to make some API calls to do data setup or query of data, I explicitly call out saying that yes, this step is done via API. So whoever is reading it knows how that action or that set of business value is being implemented. The rest of the steps I write in a declarative fashion. Declarative fashion, if you're not aware, you're talking about the business language, the business rules, what that represents. It's not the UI actions that are being done by the user. There is no click, there is no navigate, there is no enter text as words used in your test specification. But this again is a standard BDD way of writing, declarative versus imperative. Definitely you should not be using the imperative style of writing the test, because that is going to lead to chaos and a lot of rework as your product evolves. You want to focus on the business value of these tests at the top of the pyramid. And when you run these tests, this is your self-executing documentation of the product about what are the business rules being accomplished. Okay. So also what Cucumber allows you to do is add as many annotations as you want on the scenarios. There is no rule over here other than the Gherkin syntax, what characters might be allowed or not. But this is free flow text. You can add whatever tags you want. And the way TestWiz uses this, there are a certain set of tags which determine which platform the test is going to execute on. So in this particular case, the way TestWiz interprets this scenario, Android and web as two annotations on the test, means this test can execute on Android native app as well as in the browser. If there was only web, the test will run only in the browser. If it's only Android, it will run only in Android. Dynamically, the test framework will pick it up, which is a subset of tests that can be executed, and it will run accordingly. Okay. And to me, though, the biggest advantage of using a syntax like this or a tool like this, Gherkin, is it will let you focus on the business objective. Reading a test, it has to be extremely clear very quickly. What is the intent of the test? What is the business functionality you are able to achieve as part of executing this? Okay. But again, this is nothing new, right? This is standard Cucumber-based implementation. There's nothing new in this aspect. Now, in this case, the way TestWiz would run this is we specify this test, and when you execute this test, this is going to run on Android emulators. It's all command line driven. It is designed as a command line way of executing the test. That means it can very easily be integrated in CI as well. Okay, so that's the approach that is taken. Now, when you start running the test, there are two emulators here. It will pick up the first emulator that it finds and run the test over there. It's standard functionality that you have. When the tests complete, there is a link to the reports as well, and everything is fine. But so far, there was nothing interesting. There is no unique value proposition what TestWiz brings to you. The place where it starts getting interesting is the different type of scenarios which we have encountered more in the past couple of years than before. And that set of complexity is very interesting to think about how you will automate it. We are living in a hyper-connected world. It's great to see everyone in person, but we are recording this. Someone will see this, watch this recording later on, hopefully, right? We are living in a hyper-connected world where it's a world of collaboration and interactions with each other in the virtual world. This interaction can be from different devices that you have. Some might be, for example, if you take Zoom as a platform, right? Someone might be on the browser, someone might be on mobile web, someone on native apps, desktop applications, but they're all connected to the same meeting and interacting with each other. And in form of interacting, someone is speaking or multiple people are speaking, screen sharing is going on, chat is there. There's a lot of collaboration happening with all the people who are connected in the meeting. Now, if you think about it, how are you going to test this type of scenario? How are you going to automate this type of scenario? Because as a single user, I can launch the browser, I can launch the app on a device. But there's only so much I can do as a single person in the meeting. I cannot validate or test any of the other functionalities like share screen, chat, because it is disabled as a single user in the meeting, right? So you need to get the real interactions happening and validated in an automated fashion to make sure everything is still going to work fine. So the question really is, how would you automate this type of scenario? Okay. Anyone has any thoughts how you could do that? Okay. What do you mean by that, orchestrating server?
You need to have a server that will coordinate test machines, what to do, and
okay. Okay. And who's going to tell the server what is to be done?
the test script.
Okay. So exactly, right? You need to have a test script which will allow you to do the orchestration between different types of devices that you want the test to have the validation for. Okay. So this is how TestWiz solves that problem. Okay. So what we are trying to do with this approach is allow multiple users to be part of the same scenario for the orchestration to happen. And these users could be on any of the different platforms that we spoke about. So how does TestWiz do this? Again, I always like to start from the top. How are you going to specify your test intent? That's what provides the clarity of what needs to happen. Now, in this case, again, it's a syntax that I have come up with, but if you have to use TestWiz, you can come up with your own nomenclature, how you want to have your steps defined. But over here, we are saying who is the persona doing the action, and where is that persona going to interact with the application. So this is a host coming on Android native app. That is a persona coming from the platform, and that is how the interaction is going to happen. We also have another persona guest, who is in this case also coming from an Android device. But now these are two different persona on two different Android devices. Okay. Now, if this is what the test is, let's see how the implementation of this would be. So in this case, again, I've got two personas over here, two emulators running. I trigger a test from command line. The first persona is going to pick up the device that is available and log in over there. The host is going to log in. So if the user is first created using APIs, then the host logs in. When the host logs in, starts a meeting. When the meeting starts, you see there's only one person in the meeting. It's just you in here, right? Now at this point in time, the second part of the orchestration has started. The guest is coming is going to launch an app on another device which is available. And in this case, you see the app has launched. Now, the guest is going to connect to the same meeting that the host has started on another device. Enter the meeting details. And when the guest connects to the meeting, now you see there are two users as part of the same orchestration. And now you've got two devices, two different users over there, and your test is able to do the orchestration simply by saying which persona needs to do what business functionality. Why is this solution interesting? Because you do not have to think about how do I manage the devices, how do I get the applications installed on any other device or not. TestWiz as a framework is taking care of all that management, and you are simply able to use, by defining your own syntax, you're able to specify how that orchestration needs to happen. Okay. Let's see another example over here. That example could be for multiple platforms. Not everyone would come on the same platform, right? So in this case, we could have the host coming on web and the guest comes on Android. That is also possible. You're still able to do that orchestration over there. So in this case, if we look at, here's a different scenario. Again, just run the test by providing the right configuration, the parameters for the framework. Now the host in this case is coming up again on Android. Sign in, log in, start a meeting. Meeting is started and the guest is now coming from the browser, in this case connecting to the same meeting. And when the guest connects, you see there are two people in the meeting again over there. Okay. This aspect now becomes very powerful way for you to test the multiple user scenarios on different platforms. Okay. Any thoughts or questions so far? Yeah.
How easy is it to configure the different devices? Sorry.
Okay.
All right. Sorry. Thanks. Yeah. How easy is it to configure the different devices in the background?
So you need, in this particular case, the test is running on local machine.
Okay.
I need to have emulators available. Or if I say I want to have a particular browser, I want to run the test on a particular browser, I need to have the browser installed on the machine. But TestWiz does allow you to integrate with any cloud solution as well. So devices could be on the cloud and you could run it just by providing a different configuration value. We'll be talking more on that as well.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you. So do you reckon that we should have one source code instead of many, like Android, iOS, so we don't have to split the efforts? So, for example, like we would use Flutter or React Native to have just one source code, like one source of truth, and we can just like make the test just once instead of many times. Yeah.
So if I understand the question correctly, right? the source code of the test implementation you're talking about, right? Is that the right thing?
Yeah.
So this is one framework which is going to take care of web or native apps or desktop applications interaction. Okay. And the advantage of doing that is then you can do this orchestration. This test, it does not matter. Now you saw in both the examples, right, the way you're signing in or connecting to a meeting. On a native application, it's a completely different way of interaction as compared with the browser. But your test does not care about it. Your product owner does not care about it. Your business owner does not care about it. They are saying a guest should be able to join an existing meeting. Of course, they will care about the technical details, how that flow needs to happen. But that's the next step, right? As a functionality, we are saying guests should be able to join the meeting, given a platform. So now my same scenario could run. I could just change the platforms in, flip it across, and the test will still run. Because I'm not talking about how the guest needs to join the meeting. I'm just saying as a business functionality, they should be able to join the meeting, right? The implementation of this, and if there is interest and time later on, I can show you the example code. In fact, all of this is there on GitHub. You could look it up as well, right? All these tests are there in GitHub. So you could see the kind of design I've tried to put into the framework. It's a little opinionated way of implementing the test. Right or wrong, I don't know. But this is something that has worked for me in the past 8-10 years. I've been implementing test frameworks using this thought process in mind. And it very easily scaled to allow me to implement multi-user scenarios as well with the same approach. Okay. Of course, it can get better, but this has worked for me a lot in the past.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay. So let's try and make it more interesting. So far what we have seen, we've seen multiple users. So different personas coming in from different platforms. There is a different level of complexity that you can still have in your application. And that is multiple app scenarios. There are different types of applications that you need to interact with to complete an end-to-end scenario. So let's look at a few examples. A very simplistic view of an e-commerce flow. Okay, very simplistic view. Let's say you're placing an order from an Amazon app or any e-commerce app, right? When the order is processed, when you place an order and the order is processed, eventually it will get to the warehouse to say this item or these set of items need to be shipped to the user. Okay, so this part of the flow is extremely simplified. I'm sure it's not as easy. But once it gets to the warehouse for processing, they will use a different set of applications to process the order and say, okay, which item should be picked up and how do they need to get to the delivery center or the local dispatch center from where it will be shipped to the user. When it comes to the local dispatch center, they might have different set of application, and these are the delivery agents who are coming to deliver the your products to you. They have a different application than what you would use as a consumer to place the order. But when they come to deliver the order, they will process on their application the order has been delivered, and at that point you see the status change in your application. Yes, the order has been delivered to me, right? This flow is a simplified version, makes sense, right? How it would flow, how the order flow would happen. Now, in this case, these are the very few types of scenarios that you would want to automate as well in your application. Each application will be tested independently, of course, but you want to see if the overall integration of your applications work well. What would happen if the customer rejects the delivery? What is going to happen immediately in the delivery agent's app? What is the status that you would see over there? And vice versa. So how would you automate this type of scenario? There's another type of scenario which might be interesting to you, where you've got different versions of the application and they are interacting with each other. A good case is of Zoom itself, right? Two different versions of the Zoom application. And if I just talk about the desktop application, there are two different versions over here. It could be the same for native apps as well. It could be the same for web. Is of course, you are always on the latest version, unless you've got A/B experiments going on over there. But if you want to see the different versions of the applications, if there is still compatibility, is there something breaking in between that integration or not? Are your APIs maybe backward compatible or not in specific scenarios? How would you test those? So far what we've seen is your test is able to orchestrate between the same application on different platforms. If I say Android, there are 3 users on Android, they will all get the same version of the APK on all the 3 devices and you will interact with them. But how will you orchestrate different versions of the application? And this is how TestWiz is able to solve that challenge. Over here, we are saying, of course, the test step is indicating who is doing the action. So the persona part remains the same. What we also now add over here is what version of the application you want to work with. And this is just again a syntax or a nomenclature that I came up with. You might come up with a much more better design around this. But I'm saying I'm using a GeoMeet latest application on Android, and guest one is using an older version of the GeoMeet application. GeoMeet is a similar application as Zoom is. It's used in India. So you can now specify as part of your orchestration which version of the application you want to use for that orchestration. And when you have specified it, it's only the first time a persona needs to interact with your application, you would specify that. For the subsequent steps, you just focus on this persona and what type of functionality they need to implement. That's it. Okay. So your first interaction with your application will determine what version of the application you can use. And with this approach, you could very easily say it's not just different versions, it could be different applications itself. Host could be using, instead of host, it is buyer using the consumer app, it is delivery agent using the delivery app. You could do it very easily in that fashion as well. But now you have the control of specifying what type of application to use. And once that is done, then the orchestration will continue anyway based on that. Okay. So let's look at an example over here. This example may not be very easy to spot in terms of what's going to happen, but we know host is on the latest version, guest is coming on an older version of the application. That is what the orchestration is saying. Now, in this particular case, when we run the test, again, the same flow is going to repeat. In this particular case, you do not see any visible difference between the two versions of the applications between the host and the guest. At least this scenario does not highlight any of the UI differences between the two versions of the application. So, but the test is going to pick up, if you look at the logs, also you will see there are different versions of the apps being used for installation, and that orchestration will continue again. Okay. So the same flow continues. To make it more interesting, you could also do it as 3 users, what I showed earlier in the slide. So again, this is an example of 3 users, 2 on Android using different versions of the APK, and my web could be on a completely different version as well, because the release cycles of all these platforms might be different. So over here as well, we'll see the host has logged in, the meeting has started. Now guest, the first guest is coming on older version of the app launches, connects to the same meeting. Now we see there are 2 users in the meeting. And then the third user, the second guest, is going to log in from the browser. When the guest logs in from the browser, we see there are going to be 3 participants in the meeting. They're all using different versions of your application. Now, mind you, these are expensive scenarios to implement and execute. You would not want to have a lot of these types of scenarios. But especially based on context of the application, you might want to do this type of orchestration to test interesting scenarios that is there. For this type of application, for Zoom type of application, you will need more than 1 participant for sure to test effectively, test all the functionality in an effective way. And this approach will let you do that without having to build and manage things on your own. The framework can take care of all the driver and device management, and you can just focus on implementing the test. That is the real intent behind implementing TestWiz, how you can build this orchestration in an easy fashion. Okay. Any questions about these additional use cases? Yes.
Is there any syntax defined like profiles, user profile or the behavior profiles, so you can reuse in other scenarios?
Yes, of course, the framework architecture is in such a way that, and actually it depends on you how you want to implement it, right? I'll show more about the architecture in a little bit, but This is a simple BDD tool that you are going to use to implement your tests. The part that you do not need to do is how to create the drivers and how to associate a persona with a driver. There are APIs in the framework in TestSwiss that you would call to say, create a driver for me. If the driver exists, it will give an error. It is not going to do any magic and say, wait a minute, as a host, you are trying to create a new driver where a driver is already created. Sorry, we will not automatically give you the older driver, right? The test will fail over there because the driver is already created. I want the test to fail explicitly and as quickly as possible if there is something wrong. Then you can correct it. If we try to do any magic in that, it will be a problem. So with that thought process, the driver management is taken care of by TestSwiss. How you implement the test, I have a thought process how to do that. The sample test will show that thought process as well, how to implement it. So you can do maximum reuse of the implementation that has happened. Okay. So I'll try to show some examples on that as well.
Any other questions?
Just a simple one. Is there a limit of the number of users that you can add in your framework?
It's completely based on the resources available on the machine where the test needs to run. If, for example, you want to have 20 different users on Android, so 20 Android devices possible, you can do that, but on local, it will not work, right? It's going to, the machine is going to crawl and crash. If you use a cloud solution in this case, it should be possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. By the way, while Rahul is asking a question, for those who are watching this later, this is not wine, it's just water.
Real water?
It's real water. Yeah, these days we have to quantify water is also real. That's the world we live in.
So Anand, I think you talked about, you wouldn't, these are expensive tests and you wouldn't automate these scenarios to, you wouldn't automate too many of these scenarios in the first place. So my question, one question which I had was, let's say if we have some number of scenarios like this, do you have any real world example of how reliable these tests were? If they were automated using TestSwiss?
See, if I implement, they are 100% reliable. Okay. But I cannot take that, make that judgment for others, right? See, it's essentially around how stable the environment is, how stable the app is, and how well have you implemented. It all comes down to that.
Though when I look into the time of execution of these scenarios, each of those videos were around 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
I think one thing which, though I think network is getting reliable more and more, but you cannot guarantee reliability of the network in the first place at times, right? So with that, because these are expensive and you wouldn't automate some of these, and in fact one of the last examples you showed was going into different, if I use the language of domain driven design, going into different bounded contexts itself. So we are talking about tests which spans from one bounded context to maybe multiple bounded contexts, right? So how many number of what would be the ideal number of test case you could recommend for an application like Zoom, which could be automated at this layer?
Okay. So I don't work with Zoom, so I don't know the internals to understand that, what type of testability is available within the application to do that. Okay. So it's a very vague question. I cannot give any concrete answer for Zoom type of application. Okay. But a similar application, GeoMeet, that I showed as an example, right? It's a very similar application from a thought process point of view. Because this is a collaborative application, if I have to focus just on top of the pyramid, so in general, top of the pyramid will be 1% of your test compared to the number of unit tests that you have. If you just focus on the test pyramid point of view. So if I have 100 unit tests, there'll be one end-to-end scenario on the top. The rest will be spread out in between of sorts. Now, with that, in that 1% itself, for a Zoom or GeoMeet type of application, the number of tests you can have, which will do that end-to-end validation as a single user, is going to be very less compared to what you can do as a multi-user, right? So if that 1% represents, let's say, 100 tests, 1% at top of the pyramid represents 100 tests, maybe 5 or 10 scenarios will be a single user scenario. The rest will need to be multi-user, because that's where a lot of functionality can really be tested. If I want to send a chat message and there are 40 people in the meeting, okay, I want to send chat message to all the hosts, to hosts and panelists, to only specific people, or to everyone. Now, these are different types of personas, different types of users, based on which how you will be able to test that. When you send a message, only those people should receive it as well. Others should not receive it, right? So you have to understand the application, and based on that, see what type of number of scenarios will be there. So for Zoom type of application or GeoMeet type of application, there will be more multi-user scenarios than a single persona scenario at the top of the pyramid. But if you look at the other example of Amazon, for example, right, different delivery apps and all that, that might be just, if there are 100 tests at top of the pyramid, maybe just 2-3 might be sufficient to see the end-to-end validation. Now, again, you have to think about cost value. Is it worth automating that end-to-end across applications? Or do you just want to do it manually? It depends on your release frequency, release cycles, how much you want to spend on manual.
Hi, my name is Arman, and I have a couple of questions in regards of, so you are advertising this framework, and let's say I would like to try it and implement in my development cycle.
Yeah.
My question is, what would be your estimate how difficult it is to be integrated within the development and release cycle? How well this framework is maintained, and if, let's say, my development team would like to introduce any changes.
Absolutely.
Basically, how reliable this tool is, because I know that the BDD framework is very hard to maintain.
So very good question, and that was actually the last couple of slides that I have over here, but let's talk about that. That's an important thing, right? So first of all, I'm sharing my experience of how to implement these scenarios as form of this framework. If you use this, if you start it, if you fork it, if you like it, whatever, it's a great morale booster for me, but it has to solve your problem first of all, right? So you use it the way it is, great. If not, take the concepts and you could implement it on your own as well. It's open source. You could see how the implementation has happened, okay? That's the first part. So this is not in any way a sales pitch for the framework. I'm trying to sell the concept over here, okay? That's the first part. The second thing, this framework is already used by more than 10-20 teams in various places, mostly out of India. And they are using it for GeoMeet, where they've automated more than 500 scenarios across Android, web, Windows, using the framework. And they are running on a daily basis hundreds of these tests as part of the Azure pipelines that we have set up. It points to pCloudy or Browser Stack Cloud Farm as well. That's where the execution happens. So the framework is pretty stable. And as we look into the details of the architecture, how the tech stack is, you will see there's nothing fancy really in that sense, right? It's standard tool sets that are being used where the orchestration is being managed from TestWiz perspective. Okay. And of course, because it's open source, you could, of course, there are certain set of enhancements, features that I want to add as a capability. You might have some additional or different set of wish list. Raise a pull request, we work together and we make that happen. Yeah.
What's behind the?
Yeah, we'll get.
What's the behind the Gherkin language?
Yeah. Like we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay. So maybe we just pause the questions. Let me show what the next thing is, and then we can get into these, because I think these are very important questions that anyone would have. Okay. Now, before we get into the implementation, the important aspect of any framework is not just to run the test, is to see the results of what has happened and be able to take decision on based on if the test has failed, why it has failed. Anyone uses TestNG over here as a runner? No? Okay. Anyone has implemented a retry listener? If your functional test fail, automatically rerun the failing test. Okay. That's a feature. If I had a magic wand, I would say delete that feature. Do not automatically rerun the test if there was a failure. Because if you rerun and the test passes, then you have hidden the fact why it failed. you're bypassing that, right? I would rather the test fails, but if it fails, understand why the test has failed so you can fix the root cause. Now, to get to the root cause, I don't want to rerun the test again to find out, get the logs or get some additional data. So what TestWiz does is it integrates with report portal, so a comprehensive rich reporting tool as a reporting server for that matter, which gives you a lot of different capabilities as well. It also uses integrates with Applitools for visual AI testing and ultra-fast grid. And there is also an aspect of coverage that you want to understand from your functional tests. And it integrates and builds those types of reports as well. So let's look at this first before we get into the technical details. So report portal is great for me because it's a central server. It collects all the execution reports in one place, and it will show the same BDD scenario that you wrote in your report as well. So you can actually see the executing documentation of business functionality in report portal at a high level. And you'll be able to drill down into each of those steps where you'll see the screenshots. You could log your, if you're making API calls, you can log the request response. You can do whatever logging you want as part of that. The test implementation is in control of what needs to happen as part of it. But it all gets consolidated in one place. So you can see the rich report of the execution over here. Also, if you run it with Applitools Visual AI enabled, you will see the visual testing results as well as part of the same test over here, including link to the Applitools dashboard. Now, if you're running on devices, we capture the device logs and attach it to the report as well. If you're running in the browser, we capture the browser logs and attach it to the report as well. So the whole intention is, if the test fails, can you avoid trying to rerun the test to figure out why it failed? But do you have the information already that you can take a decision quickly and say why it failed and what needs to be fixed? So we don't want to rerun the test just to find out why it failed. That is a thought process. Of course, you will keep evolving in your approach as you start implementing and running the test, but all that capability can be here in one place. So this is great from what has happened in the execution. But this is not why I like report portal a lot. The main reason why I like report portal is the analysis capability and what type of dashboards you can create on the executed tests. So whenever a test fails, it will show up as with this tag to investigate. The team member needs to take a look at the reports, understand what the reason of failure is, and classify it. Again, you can choose the classifications. Is it a product bug, a data issue? Is it an environment issue? Is it an automation bug? The test might be out of sync or not doing the right thing, whatever type of categorizations. But when you categorize it, then you can create very interesting dashboards on top of it automatically to say what is the trend analysis of your executing tests. It also has ML capabilities, which when you have started taking these decisions, subsequent test runs, it will try to classify it automatically by looking at the results based on what your classification has been in previously. So it will help you do the analysis also. And we all have come across flaky tests, right, in the UI. It's a very interesting widget that they give out of the box to identify which tests are flaky. Because it's all, the data is all there in the server itself, it identifies which tests are flaky as well, which means you can focus more on the flaky tests and try to solve it instead of looking at some other tests. So it's all about ROI. So I think report portal is a great tool. It takes literally less than 5 minutes to set it up. And you can use that. So I strongly recommend you take a look at it. Again, the concept is what is important. I'm not saying you use report portal, but the features it offers is something that you would want to try and build in your reporting tool as well. Okay. The next part is the visual testing. Now, TestWiz integrates with Applitools, and it also integrates with Applitools ultra-fast server, ultra-fast grid, which means the test that I ran for 3 users, right? Host, guest 1, guest 2. The 2 users were on Android. We see that over here. But the 3rd user, which was on web, automatically I'm able to get visual validation for all the browsers and devices that I configured the test to run on. So as part of one test execution, I get the functional and visual validation across all my supported configurations automatically. Okay. And of course, there are a lot of features of Applitools, but this is not Applitools talk, right? But visual testing can give you a lot of increased coverage by writing less code. And that can be very powerful for your automation as well, functional automation. The last part from functional testing, how many of us have asked for, or we've been asked the question, what is the coverage from your automated tests, the UI automated tests? Has anyone asked us the question that, or we've asked the question? And what is the answer typically?
Well, can be measured in different ways. Depends on the basis for the test coverage. It could be the user flows, it could be the features, it could be the.
So it could be user flows, features, that is there, right? But how do you really measure it? How do you find out what the latest number is?
Well, because
when you run your regression suite,
because it's a functional test, you need to define the set of your functions, which will be the 100%, and
right.
then you will be able to measure the current test coverage.
Correct.
Without it, you can't do it.
Yeah. So that's good. So you define what are your functional your features, but once you have your features defined, you still have to tag those features with your tests, and somehow need to have a mapping to say what the coverage is or not. Correct.
There are different ways how to measure it or calculate it. You can write it in a dummy test scenarios or feature files, or you can somehow else store them.
Okay.
But the main thing is you need to define your baseline first, and then measure the coverage.
Makes sense. Okay. You want to add?
Yeah, one of the things that we do, well, I've certainly done on API testing, and where I currently am at the moment, is basically look at all the endpoints, look at all the scenarios I would have done manually, and use that as a basis.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's manual versus what is running in automation.
Whatever I had manually, I try and automate. That's the basis which I calculate coverage through automation.
Okay. Sounds good. I can pass it.
You can also use your.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I think it's on.
Yeah, there we go. In previous teams, I've also used the analytics framework to measure percentage of functional testing. Whatever version. I'll just speak really loudly and hope that helps.
I can repeat as well, not always.
Yeah, so with your analytics framework, if you have 100 pages and you visit 50 of them, you've got 50% coverage.
Okay. So based on pages and analytics data, you can correlate. Okay. I'm really glad no one said code coverage over here, right? Because code coverage is a very bad metric, in my opinion, to look at from a functional testing perspective. There's a comment over there.
It's for people who are online.
Am I interrupting, or are you finished?
No, please go
on. You picked a really good example with a software like Zoom. How would you verify on the clients that the video that they see is the video that is really should be there?
Correct. Very good question. So video streaming, or audio quality is not part of this. This is just about functionality. It's not about video streaming and audio streaming. I don't think the functional testing frameworks might be the right choice to check for video performance, audio streaming. There would be different set of tools that you should look at that, right? So that is not something that I even attempt to try over here. Okay. But talking about the coverage side of it, to complete that thought, right? Many times people say, I will measure the code coverage from my functional tests. And that is a very bad thing to do, because you anyway want the number of UI tests to be as less as possible. What value are you going to get by looking at code coverage from these UI tests? Also, what it means is when I'm running my UI test, no one else should be using the environment. Otherwise, that is going to impact the coverage that your tests are now trying to capture. Okay. So I really like what you mentioned, right? And that's the thought process that even I go with. Look at the functionality or the features of your application and think about it as features or modules, components, whatever makes sense for your application. It is something for you to relate to and the team to relate to that information. But once you have that information available, what are the different features? The way I am trying to do this is we have those features as annotations in your Cucumber scenarios. We saw the Android and web annotation, for example, right? You could add those feature annotations in the scenarios, as many as you want. And then when you run your test suite, I create a different type of report it's a standard. Again, I'm using a available plugin, Cucumber reporting plugin over here. One of the features of this is creating a tag statistics. You will see over here, there's a tag option over here on the tab. The tag statistics will tell you what are the different tags that have been used as part of your execution, and it creates a sort of a heat map. This is a bad example because I just ran one scenario. That's why everything looks the same. But the tag statistics will tell you which of your features have been executed more than others as part of your regression cycle. And now again, it's a human aspect required over here. Which features are higher priority for me? High impact, high user impact, high business impact. Do I have enough coverage for that or not? It is just a reference for you to say, when I run my regression test, do I have sufficient coverage based on the priority of my features? And that can give you an insight to say, what next do I need to focus on as well? Okay. Now, it is very possible that each of your tests goes through login. Login as a feature or business functionality as well. There is a way to exclude certain tags from the report as well. So TestWiz provides that. So you don't want to have the common tags that will keep interrupting or creating noise in your report, right? So you can very easily ignore those from the report as well. So when you run tests using TestWiz, you will get this type of report, which is only for that execution. There's no trending over here. You will get report portal, which will give you trend analysis and ability to analyze your test results. One place for all your execution data that will be there. And you have Applitools, which will give you the visual testing results as well. So all these set of information combined hopefully provides you a very rich set of information, what is happening with your application. And hopefully you'll be able to take better steps to correct it or make it better, the quality better. Okay. So this is the execution cycle and what data you get from it. Now, what makes TestWiz unique in this case? It's open source, but there are a lot of open source frameworks that are there, right? But it supports a multi-user, multi-device, multi-app type of orchestration. And also you can run it on local as well as point it to the cloud as well, based on what and how you want to run this. This supports web browsers, mobile web browsers, Android apps, iOS apps, Windows desktop apps as well. This is what is the current usage of TestWiz, how it's being used by different teams. Okay. The tech stack that is used is Cucumber JVM to specify your test intent. Internally, I use APM test distribution, which is another open source framework, which manages the Android, iOS, and Windows devices. APM, of course, to do the actual integration or interaction with these devices. Selenium WebDriver to interact with the browser. Report portal for reporting. Applitools for visual testing. And Gradle as a build tool. So TestWiz is a combination of all of these. Plus, of course, it has some logic to do the driver management, device management to ease the pain from the implementation point of view. Okay, so everything is open source except Applitools visual testing. That's a license that you would need to purchase if you want to do that. Okay, everything else is open source tech stack over here. And because we are using all standard tool sets, the support aspect of it also becomes easy. There's nothing really different or unique that is being done by TestWiz other than orchestrate and manage all these in a way that will allow you to write your tests in an easy fashion. Okay. Running the tests, we saw some of the commands when on the earlier slide, right? There were a lot of parameters that were there. So there are a lot of defaults that TestWiz has. And to make your test execute, you would specify certain set of parameters in form of property files. The way I do this, if I'm running on local, there is one property file. If I'm running in the cloud or in CI, it's another property file. And I just tell based on a parameter which property file to be used for execution. But the property files will override the defaults that are there in TestWiz. So that becomes an easy way for you to customize what your execution needs to be like. But again, if you notice, I ran different set of tests without changing the property files at all. The property files had certain set of defaults, but I can override that from command line, either in form of environment variables or as command line variables. This becomes very powerful way again for me to run a different set of tests against a different environment or a different type of application, different subset of tests, Or if I want my developers to run these tests as well on their machine, only specific tests, I just tell them which command to be run. You don't have to go and make changes in your property files to change the execution that is there. Okay, so all of this can be overridden at command line, which again makes it very easy for you to integrate with CI for different types of test executions that you need. Okay, so how to proceed from here, right? What's next? TestWiz, you would use it as a library in your automation framework. There is this project that I've created, getting started with TestWiz. The tests that I ran are part of this project, and it uses TestWiz as an internal dependency. So you are building your framework, a standard Cucumber JVM based framework. This is a Java stack. Okay, so you are building your Cucumber JVM based framework using TestWiz as a library. This examples in this framework will tell you how I structure my tests. If I want the same test to run on different platforms, how would I manage that? How would I do the reuse out of it? Where should the assertions go? What is my page object pattern that I'm using? In fact, I don't use page object. I use business layer page object pattern. That makes it easier for me to avoid duplication of code and reuse as well. So that's the pattern that I use. So this getting started with TestWiz framework showcases how that implementation can be done for different platforms. So you could, if you want to try it out, you would just clone this repository, run the same commands that I showed. The feature files has the same command as comments over there. You could run the same commands and it should ideally work out of the box. The same sample test should work on your machine as well. Assuming, of course, you've got the standard dependency setup, APM and whatever else, you have those set up and the emulators are running as well. The second way, of course, you might see a lot of gaps in implementation because this is growing based on the usage, the requirement that I have or the teams that are using it has. So if you have a different requirement which is not available in TestWiz, you can, of course, raise a pull request or we can collaborate and we can get that added in TestWiz. So it's not only available to you, it can be available for others as well. Okay, so that is how you could contribute to it as well. Either use it as a consumer of TestWiz, or you could help collaborate and enhance the capabilities of this as well. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop talking, but I hope the concept that I shared, which I hope is the main message over here, how to automate these different types of scenarios, that is, I was able to share that in an effective way. Okay.
Thank you so much, Anand. That was a great talk. First of all, are there any more questions? Do you mind answering a few more? Or
There's one.
thanks, Anand. That was a great talk. Yeah, I was just curious about the multi-user feature of your framework.
Yep.
So, of course, you can use it to automate with multiple users, like you made that pretty clear. But how far have you gone into stress testing or performance loading the framework when the kind of testing you want to do is like very fast, chatty communication between these users?
It completely depends on. So the only thing TestWiz adds to this, right, is instead of you saying, I want to create a new Selenium WebDriver or a new APM driver, you're delegating that to TestWiz, and it is doing the orchestration between that. After that, it is completely your code, how you are interacting with the driver. It's essentially, in very simplistic terms, it's a hash map of a persona and what is a driver object associated with that. And in your scenario, if you say guest is sending a message, all TestWiz is doing is get the appropriate driver, give it as a handle to you, and you're doing actions on that driver. After that, it is your implementation. How quickly can you do it? If you want to send async requests or whatever else you want to it, it's completely on the implementation side.
So if we wanted to use this to say simulate like a stock trading application, you know, just lots of users doing, it could handle that?
It could handle it, but again, what type of interactions you want with that, right? So you could just say trader 1 buys, trader 2 sells, trader 3 just views what is happening type of thing. It is eventually still APM or Selenium, which is going to needs to interact with the application and get information from the application. So how quick are you able to implement that? And your application is available to support that interaction. The limitations would be over there. So this is not for stress testing or load testing. You could use it for multi scenarios. You could definitely use it for that type of scenario. but it will not be that chatty is what my guess is, because it's not really designed for that perspective.
Okay, thank you.
But you could try it out. You could explore that.
All right, just one more question. If there's anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I just want to say thank you and a round of applause for Prezi, who've hosted tonight and deserve credit for that. And also for, Talent Realized, who put the food on for us as well. And a final round of applause for Anand and his team from Applitools, who are here tonight, and a great talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just to let you know that we do meetups every month, usually. We may be doing 2 actually in November. I'm just trying to arrange that. With different venues. As I said, you're more than welcome and the more people who come, the better it is for us and for a vibrant testing community here in Sydney. We are putting on decent events on QA, on automation, on DevOps, and on testing. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming and hope to see you again. In the meantime, we will be here for a bit longer for a bit more mingling and networking and chatting. And I hope to speak with you in due course. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.